is His Royal Highness Prince Jaime of Bourbon-Parma, and we will be interviewing him. Prince Jaime is the Senior Advisor on Private Sector Partnerships to the UNHCR. His mission, should he choose to accept it, which he did, is to provide ways to boost self-reliance in refugees. There are many opportunities to do this, but his current focus is in leading the Clean Energy Challenge, a challenge to bring renewable energy to refugees. To the interview, Portal of Awesomeness! Woo! Interested in you and what you do, so it's an honor to talk to you today. This isn't much of an intro, because we're too excited about the questions, but most importantly, your answers. Let's get started!
I'm ready.
So to begin with, can you tell us about your childhood?
So I grew up, how old are you, Leon? 8. So I lived until I was 8. I lived first in France, in Paris, until I was 4 years old, and then in Spain. So I learned a bit of French, and I spoke Spanish with my father. My father is Spanish and French, and my mother is Dutch, so I spoke at home Dutch as well. And then after I was 8, I moved to the Netherlands. So I grew up most of my years of my youth in the Netherlands, and that's where I grew up.
How is the Netherlands like? Is it one of those countries which have like loads of seasons, but like London has seasons, but it's cold and like all year round? Is Netherlands like one of the countries where it's like hot in the summer and cold in the winter? Like America?
No, it's not as extreme as America. It's actually very close to the UK. So if you look at the UK and you see Europe, we're one of the closest countries to the UK. So our climate is very similar. And so we're not in the middle of the continent where you get very cold winters, very hot summers. Our climate is tempered by the sea. The sea kind of dampens the temperature differences. So it's colder, fresher throughout the year, and it rains a lot.
So where are you actually now?
Now I'm part of the galaxy, universe, solar system, Earth, Europe, Switzerland, Geneva.
Ooh, Switzerland! Chocolate. Here that place has good chocolate.
Oh yes, they do have very good chocolate. It's a pity I can't send it to you because, well, when it reaches Singapore, it would have melted a bit.
Yeah, maybe. Wouldn't have lasted too long. How many languages do you know?
Ooh, I know 6 languages.
I basically know one. Like one proper language. English.
So I speak English and Dutch, Spanish, French, German, and a bit of Italian. So a lot of these languages are very similar to each other. So Spanish, Italian, and French are close to each other, and German, English, and Dutch. There's a lot of words that you can use for one and the other one. So it's not that you're, learning Chinese and Arabic and,
What were your favorite subjects in school?
So I loved art. So I always was drawing. And so the teachers actually made a deal amongst themselves. They would let me draw because they did realize that while I was drawing, I was listening very well to the school. And if I wasn't drawing, I might have been wandering, looking outside and forgetting about listening. So I was always drawing. And so art class was my favorite class. Really everything that makes you understand where you live, also under your ground, under your house, how it's structured. I loved all these things that explain how the world works.
I like architecture, but we're not learning that in school. It's just something I'm interested in.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And Leon, what is your favorite topic?
Astrology. If there was such thing, astronomy. There is such thing. In school. Oh, yeah, but there is such thing.
You have to wait a little bit. You'll get it. You'll get some courses on that, I'm sure.
Did you have any favorite teachers or teachers that you feel helped you a lot?
So actually, a teacher that really helped me was on a topic I was really bad at, which is math. And I really didn't like math. And I have 2 daughters, and brother and son. I have 2 daughters the same age as you guys are. But they love math, but I hated it. And I didn't get it. And then this teacher would tell me, which actually is a puzzle. And once I saw it as a game, I really started to understand it and enjoy it and everything. I never was a star in math, but I was good enough to pass all the exams.
What were some of your hobbies growing up?
So as I said, I like art, so I love drawing. So I was always drawing cartoons. That's how I taught myself how to draw.
I like cartoons as well. Mainly because you can draw and do jokes, and you don't have to worry about the quality of your drawings, because I draw stick figures.
Exactly. You can do whatever you want with cartoons. It's whatever style you like most. And I also did watercolors, which is much more difficult because
I did watercolors as well.
Charlene, you and I are the same on art. And the other hobby I had was sports. So I did a lot of gymnastics because I was not good at aiming. So I was not good in with tennis or soccer. So I looked for a sport which is cool to do, but I could do without having to aim very well. I didn't have very good coordination with ball sports, so I did gymnastics.
Honestly, I'd say I'm the same, except I'm okay at ball sports. But we did do archery this Monday, and let's just say I was aiming for the ground and managed to get it like 3 meters above the target.
That's fun. I like archery. Actually, I'm better at aiming than I thought I was. I thought I was crap at it, but actually I'm not too bad. But I thought I was bad at it. That's why I chose the other sport. Yeah.
Did you have any favorite books as a child?
Yes, and I loved. There was, Europe and the world has gone through the Second World War, and the whole world was at war. And there was a wonderful book written by about the Second World War in the Netherlands. It's called Winter War, and it was about a young boy surviving in the Second World War, and it was about friendship and about bravery and about understanding the Second World War. So I learned, but I also was very exciting. So it was a historical book, and I met the writer half a year ago in an interview like this, and he's really old. I mean, he's 85 or older. And I told him my first kind of more serious book that I read was his book. So he really enjoyed that. So
I read that you have 3 siblings. I get annoyed with 1 sibling. How do you manage 3?
So absolutely, I got annoyed with mine. So, you have this, and I had it like, we had 4 of us, so we would team up. So I have an older brother, I'm a twin, so I have a twin sister and a younger sister. And so, they're really annoying. I mean, it's fun to have fights with them. And sometimes if we still get together, we get back into that same pattern of teasing each other. But what changed over time is I always tried to correct my older brother. And then my twin sister was always annoying and everything else. And a certain time I realized, what? We don't need to be the same. It's totally fine. We like different things, and we, react differently to things. And then we really became friends. Once we accepted each other and weren't competing with each other, we really became friends. And we're absolutely different. But sometimes if we're at my mother's house, and she's 81 as well, we get back to our teasing each other, just like you two are doing right now. So that doesn't really change. But, my brother and I don't beat each other up anymore. That's over.
Did you like to play pranks on your siblings or others?
So pranks, I wasn't on my twin sister was in my same classroom. So I would always tease her. But the minute one of my friends would tease her, I would be totally protecting my sister. So I was allowed to tease her, but nobody else. So that was a funny way. So my friends thought, oh, if Jaime teases her, I could do it too. So no, that's my sister. You don't touch her, But I would always tease my sister. But it's and on pranks outside of my siblings, I had friends that were way more courageous than I was. They dared to really play pranks, and I kind of, was a bit shy about that. So I didn't want to. So I was joining, but always a bit in the back and seeing what my friends were daring to do. But then I would, share the joy.
Yeah, I'm just like mastermind of things, the quiet one. Then if the prank succeeded, yes, I did so much. Prank fails, I wasn't in it.
I totally see that happening. Yeah.
Did you have any pets?
We had a black cat, and she was a stray. She walked through the street, so we took her in. And this cat was a young female cat, and she was sometimes, because she was a bit grown up in the wild, she could suddenly snatch out, like cats can do, like suddenly. And for me, it was fascinating to try to understand how she worked, how she thought. And I tried to get as close as possible with my nose to her nose and see if she wouldn't scratch me. And we really became friends. And one day the cat came and she was pregnant. And she sought me out. She went through the house, found me, and I was sick that day. I wasn't at school. And she came on my lap, and that's where she gave birth to her kittens. So I was so honored that we had such trust that she got, gave birth in my presence. I was like, wow, it's amazing to see. And 5 baby kittens came out. And I remember one of the kittens had still the birth, fleece over her, and the others were there and just running around and growing up. But the fact that she sought me out for that moment, I found, and I learned so much. I mean, so it's always curious to understand animals and how they work. And people are sometimes like cats as well, Chamonix. Some people can be like, and to see if you can get close to them and build trust, it's great. I learned a lot from that cat. You see? Watch out. Leon, you can scratch.
Yeah, we're more of a dog person. But yeah. That's actually really amazing. Also, what did you do with the kittens?
So the kittens grew up. So one of them we kept, and the other 5 we gave to friends. They're so cute. If they grow up, they get these square ears. First, they look like little mouses when they're born. They're like, and then they grow up and they become really naughty, and they're playing with each other, rolling over each other, and it's really, really nice. Yeah, but we don't have a pet right now.
Oh, get a dog. Dogs. Yeah.
No dog. Dogs I like to, but I never had a dog. Do you have a dog?
No.
Do you have a cat?
No.
Do you have a goldfish?
We had a fish until at his birthday party, one of his friends that are not really his friends fed the fish like half of the food, so it kind of died.
It didn't survive that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you need to be there to really take care of them. Huh? It doesn't always.
Yeah, the sad part was we were on holiday when it died.
Yeah, my plants die sometimes as well, so...
Yeah. If you had to describe 1 or 2 experiences during your childhood that helped build a foundation for your future career, what would those be?
So sometimes they're good experiences, and sometimes they're less good experiences. So I was unfortunate that my parents divorced. So my father and mother separated. So everyone, had to go their own way. And we ended up to live with my mother. But I always had amazing meetings with my father, and we always had vacations together, everything. But I had to learn how to live in 2 totally different worlds, because if the parents don't live together, they live their own lives. And my father was speaking Spanish, making Spanish jokes and Spanish things, and my mother was making Dutch jokes and Dutch language. So I always had to switch between thinking as a Spaniard and thinking as a Dutch person. But I also realized later that, with sad things that happen, that you kind of make a story why that happened. And I suddenly realized there were 2 stories that were true, my father's story and my mother's story. And so later in life, when someone tells me a story, I always think, is that the full story? Or are there more truths? Are there other ways of looking at it? And so as a diplomat, which I later became, and a representative of the Netherlands, as a diplomat, I always try to look wherever I am, in war zones or other places. So what makes people tick? Why are they saying such things? And is there another perspective on this? So it really, really helped me. So good and bad things will teach you things in life.
So, you were a prince from a royal family. What is the role of a royal family in today's world when there are governments for governing countries?
Yes, and luckily there are governments to govern countries, because if the full power is in one person's hand, they can become a dictator. It's not healthy. So it's always good. So I really like governments, specifically if they're democratically chosen, so you can shift power from one person to the next. We've just had elections in the US, and the new president is elected. So we see this change in power. And if that goes peacefully, it's wonderful. So it's actually quite good that kings are now part of government. They're the head of state, but the real power lies with the prime minister, and they're elected. And then the role of a king is to be the super ambassador of the country, because everybody wants to meet a king or a queen, and they can go around, and they can also, their advantage is that they think long term, because they come from many generations and they think generations ahead. Well, the politician only think in what do I do in 4 years, and then re-election, maybe another 4 years, and that's it. So they think shorter term. So if there is, so the king will help as an advisor to look at the long-term developments in the country and kind of be a moral leader to say, is it going right, or am I worried? So they have their addresses once or twice a year when they talk about the country and say what their hopes, their fears, and aspirations are for the country. And that helps. And also if there's a national disaster, so there's a hurricane or a flood or something happening, then people like to see the king or the queen as kind of the mommy and daddy of the country, and much more emotional than a prime minister would do. So I think those are the roles that a king or a queen can play. And us, as the rest of the royal family, we're just citizens. We're just people. So there's no difference. And we have jobs, and I take the public transport, I take the tram or the bus if I need to go somewhere, or I take the bike. And but we do have that name, and people say, hey, what is that? It's a prince. So it can be useful sometimes to help others. So it can be useful, but it's not the same as a king. The king has a formal role, and we've got an informal role.
As a prince, can you describe how you chose your career?
So actually, my career started with my grandfather, and my grandfather's lived like your grandfather, but way earlier. He lived in the First World War, Spanish Civil War, Second World War. He only knew war. And he died when he was 86 or something like that, and I was 4.5 years old. But he left me with a tremendous memory. I always remembered him. I never forgot him. So I always asked my father, tell me about grandfather, tell me about grandfather. So I lived with the memory of stories of war. And when I grew up and looked for what I wanted to do, I said, I want to work for peace. And in my country, Netherlands has been in peace for a very long time, but many other countries in the world have not. So that's why I've chosen to work as a diplomat, to do peace negotiations in the world.
I was reading about the paradox of plenty and the resource curse, and I did find it strange that the countries that are richest in natural resources are often the poorest nations. Can you tell us a bit about why this happens? How does an abundance of resources result in a poor country?
It's a very good question, Chamonix, and it feels strange. If you have all these natural resources, why are you actually poor and in conflict? And so that's the resource curse. It's because these resources, say you have oil, or you've got diamonds, or you've got gold, it's often in the hands of very few people. So very few people become very rich. But because it's so much money that comes in there, the currency, so the currency that people becomes also rich, becomes very expensive. And then it's cheaper for the country to buy products abroad than to produce them locally. So what you see is that rich people become very fast, much richer, and the poor have no jobs, and their money won't buy locally, so they can't produce, and they don't have the money, so only the rich have the money. And they will not be hired as laborers, only for very few they can have jobs. So that's called the resource curse. It's a negative spiral where only few earn money. And how do you combat that? Is by good governance. So if you have a very good government that is elected government, so not a dictatorship, and you've got an independent rule of law, judges, then you can kind of keep that under control and make sure that the money that is earned is not going in the pockets of just very few, but is actually going to a national fund which will pay for healthcare and invest into people to develop their own jobs and become independent. So it's a bit of a structured thing, but it's all about not being greedy and to divide that amongst everybody. So if there's an income, that's for everybody, and that's not always the case, and that's why it's called the curse.
You have visited the diamond fields of Sierra Leone, Liberia, and the Democratic Republic of Congo as part of your documentary. What did you learn from actually being there?
So that there I saw how natural resources are feeding also war. So if a few have the money and others don't, they might want to wage war for them to get the money. So I've seen how it works, and I've seen how it works throughout the supply chain and all the way to you and me. We're buying things that we don't know where they come from, and they can come from a conflict area, from conflict minerals. So just the screen we're looking at, your iPhone or a tablet, will have 35 different minerals coming from around the world, different metals. Gold, it has steel, it has aluminium, many different metals in it. And we don't know where they come from. So I became very aware that the consumer, if we do know where it comes from, we can make a difference. And that's why I made a documentary in these countries in Africa to make people in the Netherlands aware that you have to ask where the things come from. Where do the products in my glasses come from? Where do the products in my pens come from? Everything. So to make sure that people become conscious and will ask. And if they start asking, the companies will put on their label, it comes from this country, that country, and hopefully make a difference.
So this is just a question. How do you know whether it comes from a conflict mine or a non-conflict mine?
So it's all about paperwork that people write up where they buy it from. And so I have set up in Congo a conflict-free supply chain. So I went to Congo and I found a mine and we tested it to see if there was no warlords making money off the mine. And we gave labels to every little bag of minerals coming out of the earth. So people were just breaking stones, putting them together, put in a bag, and we put a label, and there was a little barcode on it. And that was linked to a satellite and to a database outside of Congo in London. And so every bag was tracked all the way to the border to make sure nothing could enter the bag or nobody could earn money from these minerals. So it was a conflict-free mine. And that system has now worked. And then if it gets to the border, it's another company that buys it. And it's a trader. And then it goes to Malaysia, to a smelter. And there's only very few smelters. So if I have the paperwork all the way to the smelter in Malaysia, I know it's conflict-free. And then from Malaysia, it goes to a company that makes screws or makes components for telephones. And then it goes to Apple or BlackBerry or Hewlett-Packard or Nokia or the big firms who also agreed to then buy these minerals that are conflict-free from conflict-prone countries. So and we started a peace economy. I started with one mine. Now we have 1,200 mines in Congo and 70,000 men back at work in Eastern Congo. And that's the only income they have. And it's horrible work. It's not great work. It's not, I go to work. But it's a way to make money. So we set up this conflict-free supply chain of minerals, and these miners have a job. So they're very happy to have a job. And that's why they will not join any military group, because they can work and they can provide for the family, but their work is not very easy. So I went with them. They live in mines, so they make these shafts, these tunnels under the earth. They just hack away. They go all the way in, and then they clean the stuff, bring it all the way out again, and put in the bags and sell it. And down there in the mine, it's very moist. It's very a lot of water. There's not a lot of air, and it smells terribly. And I went down there with them to see how it's like, how their work is. So it's very difficult work, very dangerous work, but at least it's work and they're happy to have it.
So is the idea, if you stop buying things from the conflict mines, that the warlords don't earn money and that helps stop conflict?
Exactly. So that, or at least it will make it much more difficult for them to be able to buy guns, because they always find one way or another to make money, but not the easy way. So we'll make it much more tougher for them.
It's like, if the people stop buying from the warlords, is there a possibility that they might think that it's the workers and like the miners' fault, so they might make the miners work even harder?
No, because we make very clear that the warlords know why the mine stopped working, that it's not their fault. Okay. And the miners know very well, because for a long time they couldn't work at all. And they know when it stops and why it stops. So it's very, very clear to everybody.
You studied international relations at Brown University. Following this degree, do most people choose a career in government or as diplomats?
So yes, I mean, most aspire to do so, and some will go into international business or international law, but most would like to be a diplomat. So I was very lucky to get a job in diplomacy, so I could study one thing and work on the same topic later.
What did you do as an ambassador to the Holy See?
Ooh, as ambassador to the Holy See. So Holy See is the Vatican, it's the Pope, Pope Francis. And so I thought when he became Pope that he was such an activist. He was doing all kinds of good stuff. The first country he visited was not a big country, but an island called Lampedusa with a lot of refugees. And the second thing he did, he talked about climate. And the third thing he did, he talked about peace. So I, volunteered to become ambassador there. And luckily the minister told me, you've got a good idea, so why don't you go? And I worked on peace, climate, and refugees with the Pope. And that's where we see that a country like the Netherlands and the Vatican, although they were totally different, we can work together. And they have a huge network. There's 1 billion Catholics in the world. So for peace, wherever there's a town with a church, there's someone with a cell phone you can call for information. So in Burundi with war, or now in Ethiopia with war, or in South Sudan, there's always someone walking around that can give you information on what's happening. That helps peacemakers there to help negotiate and help the situation.
How did you develop an interest in conflict-free minds? Did it stem from your experience with refugees because many refugees came from conflict zones? Or was it that your interest in helping refugees led to studying how the economics of some of these poorer countries could be improved?
So I started with being interested in conflict way earlier, as I told you, from my grandfather's time. And as a diplomat, I worked in Iraq and Afghanistan and places like that, so in war zones. Now I'm working with refugees, and they are the effect of conflict. So if a conflict erupts somewhere, people need to flee to save their lives. And they cross the border, not just because they want to, but because there's no other way for them to survive. And those are called refugees. So I'm working with people that are fleeing conflict. So it's another effect of conflict that I'm working on right now. And yes, I'm studying the economic effects, and I'm seeing how can we make the refugees not just victims of war, but self-reliant, so strong and independent people that can take care of their own family and can serve also the communities that host them, so they're their neighbors, the country that take them in. So so that's why I'm focusing on now the economic side as well of refugees, to see how can we help them help themselves.
Were you afraid to work in these conflict areas?
Yes, sometimes I was, because there's landmines and there's people with guns and there's crazy people, in every place. But it's also really exciting. There's something exciting about it, and I felt a little bit. I'm so thankful it's not my own country at war. So I can go there and it's exciting or challenging, but it's not my country, it's not my neighbors. And I can leave after a couple of months, and they cannot leave because it's their own country. So it makes you humble. It makes you humble that and thankful that your own country is not in such a mess.
What do you do at the United Nations Agency for Refugees as Senior Advisor for Private Sector Partnerships?
With the private sector, so with companies, to see what can companies do to help refugees. Because we already work with governments, and we work with aid organizations, NGOs, and we work with academic institutions, universities, to think things through. But with the private sector, we don't do much. So I'm trying to see how can we work with the private sector to find solutions for refugees. And I just talked to you about self-reliance refugees, that they become economically independent. So what do they need of help to become independent? So if they are a refugee, could a company hire them, give them a job? Or can a company invest into an entrepreneur and say, if you build your own company as a refugee, can we buy your products or your services, what you do? So if you're a lawyer, can we hire you as a lawyer? Or can we, if you're an entrepreneur, can we support your making? There's an entrepreneur in Kakuma in Kenya who makes soap. So can we buy your soap? So these are the things the private sector can do. And I'm working right now a lot with the private sector to see if we can bring cleaner and safer energy to refugees. So can we actually create a solar plant next to a refugee camp and sell the energy to refugees? And if they have the energy, they don't need to go to walk for 10 kilometers to get firewood. They don't need to fight with the local community for that firewood. It's a lot safer for people if there's energy in the camp. And they can start a business because they can charge their phones and they can do many more things with electricity. We're using electricity right now for this call. So also a lot of refugees are saying, if I have energy, I can do school through the internet. And now with COVID, they're not allowed to leave their houses. So they can use this as a means to have schooling and educate themselves or learn about the cosmos, Leo, and the solar system. So electricity is so important for their lives. So I'm focusing on that. And it's also good for climate. So we're seeing what we can do.
What happens to refugees when countries turn them down?
That's very tough. So if you had to flee your country because there's at war and you cross a border and you're asking for asylum, so meaning, can I be a refugee? Then we, UNHCR, look at their papers and see where they come from and say, yes, this is someone fleeing conflict, or no, this is someone pretending to flee conflict, but they're just general migrants. And if you're a refugee, you've got international protection. Nobody's allowed to turn you down. They have to give you safety. But of course, if too many people come, there's a management issue. How do you deal with so many people? So then we try to divide the refugees in camps in the region close to the conflict area. But there's always people continuing to travel all the way to Singapore, to Europe, to United States, or other places, to find a way to survive or maybe to be reunited with a family member there. And so it's always trying to find that balance that we need to find a safe area for them to survive. And how many people can countries absorb? And that's becoming a very political issue. It's very difficult. And then, Leon, people are being rejected. And we're trying to convince governments to say, these are people. They're not, refugees are not a thing. It's a real person. It's a mommy, it's a daddy, it's children. It's real people. And, they've got a lot of skills and a lot of possibilities, but give them a chance. And you never know in history, you might become a refugee one day as well. So be humble and let's see what we can do together. But we also recognize it's not easy to accept any refugee anywhere in the world. It's a puzzle we need to make together.
Can you tell us about the Clean Energy Challenge and how it relates to poorer war-torn countries and refugees?
So, as I explained with the energy, I kind of explained it already. But with the Clean Energy Challenge, what we try to do is we say, well, as a UN agency for refugees, we don't know much about energy. So we've said, let's put a challenge. Let's make all our refugee settlements, we have 300 in the world, let's make them all with cleaner and safer energy in the next 10 years. So when you're going to start to study, then it should be finished when you're nearly ready with school. And so we have 10 years to do so, but we have no expertise. We don't know anything about energy. So with the challenge, we've asked governments, we've asked businesses, we've asked NGOs who do know about these things, why don't you help us? And we started with 30 of them, and now we have about 250 of these organizations thinking with us how to create a market for energy in the refugee space. And I have a workshop this afternoon, a workshop that lasts 3 hours with a big company called Shell, with Mercy Corps, an NGO, and they've been doing modeling. They've been looking at the camp and seeing what are the numbers? How many people need energy? How much energy? What is their income level? Can they pay for energy or not? Does UNHCR need energy for our offices and hospitals and street lighting? And how can we make a business deal? So I'm very curious to see if that works this afternoon. And the challenge that is really trying to bring everybody together to find solutions.
What does a regular working day in your life look like? Can you describe it?
So there's a pre-COVID and after COVID work day. Before COVID happened, I was traveling a lot. So I was visiting camps to study what's happening and what can be done better. And luckily I've done a lot of travel because right now I'm not traveling at all. I'm at home. Like many people, because of the pandemic, we have to stay at home and work from home. But here I can really organize things because everybody's at home. I don't need to make appointments. I can call anybody anytime and we get things done. So I'm still doing the challenge, bringing people together and preparing for when we can travel again. Everything can be just implemented immediately. And I realize people don't need to travel. There's people in locations always. So we can also now reach out to people living in refugee camps, next to refugee camps, to be our partners and make this work, because people can't travel, but goods can. We can send solar panels. That's not a problem. Solar panels don't get COVID, so that's easy.
No, what you said about like having like people having time, that kind of reminds me of my birthday party. Like, because our house is getting renovated, and the only time I can have it isn't my parties and the Christmas holidays. And like before COVID, I used to be wondering, everyone's gonna be traveling. I can't have my party yet now. Now it's like, if I was another guest to my party, I would just be like, ooh, don't need to be stuck at home.
Well, it's wonderful that you have a chance that everybody has to be around and not be traveling. It's wonderful. You can have a wonderful party. I hope you can have it with COVID if it allows it. Yeah.
My parents tell me that people get wiser with time. What do you think you know now that you think would have been particularly helpful to know when in your youth or childhood?
So I think, Chamonix and Leon, that you're already wise. There are many things that you already know, and just stick onto them, and they will become bigger and bigger. Honestly, I knew when I was your age already that I believe that everybody has something good in them. And even people that we really don't understand, and they get sometimes misguided and they do stupid things. But there's always some good in them. And that's why you can always talk to nearly everybody. There's always a crazy person out there. But they're a lot less crazy than you would think if you really talk to them. And I kind of knew that already in your age. So when I became older, I just became more convinced of the good in people. And I also see the bad things, and really bad things as well. But there's always good, and with good you can build things. You can. So I think people can get wiser, Chamonix, or they can get more confused when they're older. But when you're a kid, you kind of feel what's right and what's wrong. So hold on to that.
It's what you said about like seeing the good in people. It kind of reminds me of this book I just finished reading today. It's Mr. Lemoncello's All-Star Breakout Game, and in the end, the character, there's this room where he has to walk like the path of his nemesis's life, so he kind of understands how he feels and why he acts like he does, which I guess is kind of like seeing the good in people, like seeing why they do the things that they do.
That's precisely it, Chamonix. That's exactly it.
Did you ever doubt yourself, and how did you manage to overcome it?
So I've doubted myself very regularly. And so if you're outside of your comfort zone, if you do something you've never done before, it's scary. Or you start to doubt. You think, am I the right person to do something about it? Or if I have to speak in front of a large audience for 100 people or more, I get like, are they gonna like what I'm gonna say? So what I've learned is that, we all have these moments of doubt. It's very normal. Sometimes they can be very useful because you rethink, why am I doing things? Sometimes they can be paralyzing, can be very negative. If you doubt too long, you become insecure, and it's a horrible feeling. So always go back to what I said before, your wisdom and your own truth, and say, listen, I don't care what they think. This is what I want to tell them.
Yes.
And that's how you overcome it. So one point I wrote a speech. It was with young global leaders. It was years back, and I had two people in front of me speak, and they were so good that I thought I had to rewrite my speech at the moment. And then I got really nervous because I had nothing good on my paper. And then the minutes, 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, I had to go on stage. Oh my God, and you start to lose a bit your self-confidence. And then I stopped thinking like that and said, no, I came with my message. Maybe it's boring, but this is my message. And I went back to my original speech, and I did it, and it felt good, and it was fine. And yes, it wasn't as cool as the other two, but I found my confidence again by not doubting myself. So going back to your own message, what you want to say. And it's not always easy. Yeah.
What are some things that most people don't understand about being a prince?
So some people think it's all a fairy tale, because in fairy tales you got a lot of princes. So there's a lot of fairy tale sort of ideas around it, but in fact it's about real people, and it's about It's not just a title that just gives you a lot of privilege or anything else. Sometimes it works for you, sometimes it works against you, because there are people that don't like titles, and so it is just a thing. And but it also comes with a lot of responsibility. So if you have a title like that, you need to use it not just for yourself, but for others who don't have that visibility. So that's why I'm giving refugees a voice, because people will listen to me. So that's how you use a title.
It's like how Spider-Man said, with great power comes great responsibility. A quote that my mum and dad think apply to me. I think I just want
Well, you've got great power. I see it already. You've got both of you great powers. So.
Except he doesn't have the responsibility to hold it.
Yeah.
I'm responsible.
And smartness is power too.
Yeah.
Being smart is power too.
See, that's my power I have, unlike you.
So smart people are not necessarily good people. Yeah. It's a choice to use it for good. Then you're a good person. And dumb people can be very good as well, because they chose to be good. So it's all a choice. So it's power, and you need to use it well.
What is the bravest thing you've seen someone do?
Wow, well, the two of you having this interview is a very brave thing, so I really appreciate that. There's, I don't know when the bravest thing, you think someone rescuing someone out of the water or something like that is brave. I think my grandfather always said, I've heard from my father, but that he always said that, either someone's really brave or really stupid. And the line between the two is brave. Because if you're really brave and put yourself out there to take someone out of the flood, you can drown yourself. Yeah. Or is it really brave because you put a lot on the line and then you do it for a good cause, and you do it very consciously. So overcoming your fears is whatever the fear is bravery. But I've also seen in Honduras, I was in Honduras when I was in early 20s, and I worked after a hurricane. A hurricane devastated the country. I mean, the whole city of Tegucigalpa was flat, and people didn't have a home, and there was mud everywhere. And I saw the day after the hurricane, kids were playing in the mud, rebuilding toy houses. And the adults were totally, on the side, totally depressed, totally understandably, but totally depressed. And the kids were rebuilding something. I mean, and that, I think the kids were not consciously being brave, but they were showing that you can rebuild things and do things differently. I think that was a great inspiration. And so I think the kids, in a way, were brave in how they show the way to the adults. And that was a beautiful thing.
If you could change one thing with the press of a button in the world or the universe, what would it be?
Now it would be the social media algorithm. So the social media, the Facebook, and I don't know if you know Twitter and all these things, they work in such a way that only people that think alike will be drawn to each other and get the news, only one portion of the news. So everybody thinks they've got the whole picture, but they only have a tiny picture, and they think that's everything. And the other person can be the neighbor, has a different algorithm, so we'll have different types of friends and only get that news. And people are now starting to hate each other because they think that the others are totally crazy. But they all don't know how to talk to each other and don't get the same information. And they all think they're getting the same information, but it's not true. So these big companies of social media, the news agencies and Google and Facebook, they have to change their algorithm to make sure that everybody gets the same information and we don't get separated from each other in our thinking. And so we won't have these fights we've seen in the US in the government, or maybe in Singapore that exists as well, and other places, that everybody gets the same information.
I don't think there's much fights in Singapore, but I'm not sure.
Singapore, maybe not as much, but in other places you see a lot of unrest and frustration, and we can take that away. So if I could change one thing right now, I would change the tech world, the way how they work.
Yeah, like with the elections, I think there was quite a bit of unrest in America.
In the US, it was a lot of unrest, a lot of fake news, and people didn't know what to believe anymore. So we can change that.
As children, we always want to be as similar to our friends as we can be. However, at the same time, our parents tell us that we're unique and that we should embrace being different, as it is through those differences that we will be able to contribute more to the world. What do you think about this?
That's a good question. I would say, if you want to be part of a group, you want to see what you have in common. And it feels safe to be part of a group. But if the group tells you that you're not allowed to be as you are, then it's not a good group for you to be in. So you have to find the right group where you look for commonalities, but where you can still be different and you be really yourself. So it's finding a balance between group thinking and individual thinking. And the more diverse the group is and the more open the group is to have a very diverse group of friends, the more fun it is. One person can do drawing and the other one can do sports and the other one can do something else and thinks differently. So I think that's the strength.
So, this is our last question for today. Is there a specific quote or advice that someone has told you or that you have found that you think is particularly inspiring?
Yes, there's a quote by Einstein, and you know Einstein, no?
Yeah.
A big guy with a mustache and lots of hair. One of the most brilliant minds in our things, and it's a very well-known quote. Everybody knows this quote, and I have it here. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when creating them. So you need to have people outside to help and think things through. So now I'm working with UNHCR of the UN because I'm not part of the UN. I came from the outside. So I bring a new perspective and I try to resolve something that they haven't been able to resolve. And the same with friends. We're just talking about diverse group of friends. If everybody's the same thinking, you will never find a solution. If someone with a new idea comes, that's useful. So I think that quote was for me quite an important one, that you need to bring other people in to find solutions.
When you said that everyone knew that, I think there are 2 people that don't know that until then. But now we know. Now we do. So thank you.
No, thank you. Guys, what a good questions and what amazing research.
Thank you.
I'm very, 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 impressed.